I recently made a video about switching from Home Assistant to the Homey Pro, and in this video, I'm going to tell you why I'm switching back. But before I do, I want to address the fact that the first video had a huge reaction and I got a lot of comments, a lot of feedback, a lot of criticism, and even some comments that were so nasty that I just had to delete them. And after seeing so many comments telling me how great Home Assistant is, it makes me wonder who actually watched the video. I never said Homey was better than Home Assistant. In fact, here, listen for yourself. I'm not saying Homey is perfect. I'm not saying it's better than Home Assistant, and I'm not committing to never going back to Home Assistant. And I'm going back. But let me reiterate the reason I switched. One time, my Home Assistant mini PC went down, and about a third of the switches and automations in my house just didn't work. And I thought, wow, what if I wasn't around, or what if something happened to me? My smart home is on a little mini PC buried in the corner of my office, not hooked up to a monitor, keyboard, mouse. No one would even know what to do. And although my wife's a brilliant person, she doesn't like tinkering with things like I do. Homey is just one simple device, plug and play, it has an easy to use app, and that's really the reason I switched. Not because I ever thought that the Homey Pro was more powerful than Home Assistant. And I'm gonna address some of the user comments at the end of the video. And before we get into why I switched back, I do wanna say that I think the Homey Pro is awesome. This thing is amazing. It's one device that could power your whole smart home. It supports tons of apps, it has tons of features, and I can see it being the right fit for a lot of people. So then why did I switch back? Well, I'll tell you. I have lots of smart home devices, Wi-Fi devices, Matter over Wi-Fi, Matter over Thread, Zigbee, but almost all of my light switches are Z-Wave. And unfortunately with the Homey Pro, my Z-Wave network was not perfect. And don't get me wrong, it was like 90% perfect, but that's not good enough for me when it has to do with my light switches. I must have like 40 Z-Wave devices, and in theory it should be fine. I have everything set up in a big mesh network, but for some reason I kept having issues. I was having all sorts of trouble trying to turn on or off multiple lights at once. For example, if I wanted to turn off all of the lights on the first floor, it would never work properly. Sometimes nothing would happen. Sometimes 2/3 of the lights would turn off and the other third wouldn't. Sometimes many of the lights would turn off and then they would slowly keep trickling off until they were all off, or maybe one or two was left on. And I couldn't figure this out. It always had to do with turning multiple switches on or off at the same time. Sometimes it was with the Homey app. Sometimes it was with Google Assistant. Like, hey Google, turn off the kitchen lights. I'm waiting. So there was just too much lag, bottlenecks, the popcorn effect. It just wasn't working for me. 90% is not good enough when it comes to lights. And I was troubleshooting to no end. I used Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, the internet, Reddit. And in all fairness to Homey, I went on their subreddit and posted about this, and I got lots of people who did not have any of these issues. But I couldn't figure it out. Now I knew going into this that Homey uses Z-Wave 700, and I have no idea why they don't support Z-Wave 800, which is the latest and greatest. I mean, literally all of my switches are Z-Wave 800. I mean, Z-Wave 700 doesn't even support Z-Wave long range, and it would be nice to see Homey upgrade to that in the future. But I think it's a combination of these things. The Homey has a little tiny Z-Wave antenna that supports Z-Wave 700, and when I switched back to Home Assistant, I got the ZWA2 Z-Wave antenna, made by Home Assistant. And don't get me wrong, I don't know how much of a difference it makes, but look at that visual. So moving back to Home Assistant with that gargantuan antenna, not to mention the advanced tools you could take advantage of like Z-Wave JSUI. And when I went back to Home Assistant, I did everything over from scratch. I re-added every single Z-Wave switch and built out my mesh network exactly the way you're supposed to do it. And after I was done and let everything settle in, it's almost flawless. And of course, now that I went back to Home Assistant, I really went nuts with this stuff. I did mention how I love Homey flows and they're fun to use, they're fun to create flows or automations, but when I went back to Home Assistant, I really just used AI instead. Even before the switch, I was using Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude to write YAML code so I can program my automations. But this time I set up the Home Assistant MCP server so Claude could actually see my entire setup. It can see the entity names of my devices, it can help run tests in the background to see why an automation may not be working, and it's really cool. Although I will have to say, it wasn't able to help me write an automation which turns my garage lights different colors depending on the holidays. As where Gemini was able to do it in a fraction of the time, and it's working perfectly. So yeah, after going back, setting up Home Assistant with my AI friends was so easy, and that's it, everything's done right now. Of course, there's always some tinkering that can be done. And of course, Home Assistant is more powerful, it's more capable, and it's literally just, there's endless possibilities of things you can do with Home Assistant. And as for my reasons of switching, well, I'm just gonna have to teach my wife, and maybe my kids too, how to use Home Assistant. Now I am gonna address some of the user comments I got on the first video, especially the ones that were repeated by several people. Of course, there's all the people that say, Home Assistant is better. Yeah, okay, that wasn't the point of the video. I also talked a lot about how I love Homey flows, and I had a lot of comments about Node-RED. I don't know why I did the quotes. And I installed Node-RED when I went back, but I never ended up using it because I just used AI for everything. So yeah, all my automations were written by either Claude or Gemini. There were also a lot of comments about LG buying Atom, which is the company who makes Homey Pro. And yeah, I get where you're coming from, but I'm not gonna assume that just because LG bought the company, they're gonna ruin it. It's definitely something that could happen, but I don't see a reason to speculate on that. Another comment I kept getting was that this is expensive at $399. And of course, that's the price here in the USA. But what exactly are you comparing it to? Homey's $400 and Home Assistant is... I mean, let's say you already have a computer sitting here that's always on. Sure, you could just install Home Assistant on that, and that would be free. Of course, you probably need some kind of hubs or antennas to communicate with your devices, but sure, that would be less expensive. But the sky's the limit. You could go in the other direction and build a hardcore smart home PC. You know, something powerful enough to run an LLM on. I mean, you could easily spend more than $400 on Home Assistant if you were so inclined. But even my setup, I have a mini PC, which is probably around 250 bucks. I mean, that antenna I showed you was 79 bucks. I also have Home Assistant's ZBT2 antenna, and that's another 50 bucks. And I have a Zigbee USB stick, which is another 30-40 bucks. And I think everything I have is a little bit more than 400 bucks. So I'm not gonna defend the price of their product, but my setup was slightly more. But then again, my setup is much more powerful, so maybe you do have a point. And sure, I made some comments about Home Assistant, like every time I open it up, there's all these updates. You know, like Home Assistant system updates or core updates or all these updates that keep happening. And I listened to your comments and said, hey, wait a second, maybe I can just have a lot of this stuff get auto-updated. And you know what? I did. There were people that mentioned Z-Wave long range, which Homey doesn't support anyway because they're still on Z-Wave 700. For Z-Wave long range, you need Z-Wave 800. But Z-Wave long range is made for very long distances. When I have around 40 Z-Wave devices all in my house, it's better to have a mesh network anyway. So what more can I say? I switched to Homey Pro because I wanted simplicity and something the entire family could easily use. And even though there's a lot of people who say it works perfectly for their Z-Wave network, it just didn't work perfectly for me. And after going back to Home Assistant and buying these hardcore antennas, getting even more devices, and having AI completely rewrite all of my automations from scratch, superpowering my smart home, I'm really not sure if I'm ever gonna be able to move away from Home Assistant again. But at the same time, I do feel like this is a great product and it's right for a lot of people. If you like my straightforward, no BS reviews about smart home and smartphone tech, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel. And as always, thank you so much for watching.